Hey everyone, this is Ole Sharanki from Laddering Your Success, and you're listening to the LYS podcast.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome one and all to EduSteps, the online mentoring podcast powered by Laddering Your Success. I'm Ole Sarunki, co-founder of Laddering Your Success, and I'm honored as always to be joined by my fellow co-founder and LYS creator, Festus Samoye. Festus, how are you doing today?
Oh, good, man. I could use a little bit more sleep. But calves are still tight on fire. But I'm doing well otherwise.
We're also blessed to be joined once again by the future Doctor of Education, DeMark Crawford. DeMark, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing all right. Happy to be here with you guys.
To hear it. Happy to have you with us as always. So today we're going to be talking about some of the big issues we'll be facing in education society, and more in 2025 and beyond. This is going to be the second part of a several-part series, I guess, that we'll be doing on the podcast. So right now, there are a lot of things happening. Some we know about, some we don't know about. Either way, all of those things will affect us as either taxpayers, parents, students, teachers, and just everyday people who depend on important things like healthcare, plumbing, police, firefighters, essential workers like nurses, doctors, teachers, plumbers, you name it, right? The future of these important jobs and industries are closely tied to politics. As much as we try to deny it or as much as we try to separate those two, politics is involved. And whoever is in charge determines how a lot of these things happen. We usually focus on how parents, teachers, and students shape our communities and schools, but as we've learned more, we see that these issues reach much further than that. It's not just necessarily up to the teachers. It's not necessarily up to the schools or the districts to determine what our children get out of their early adolescence. Today, we're going to be talking about DEI, also known as diversity, equity, and inclusion. This has been one of those hot button topics that people have been talking about for the last couple of years. And just depending on the generation that you grew up in, you may have known it as some different things, right? But when I was younger, things like affirmative action were really popular. For that, it was, part of the civil rights movement, segregation and integration and things like that. And so we come to a point now where there have been like huge moves to try and get it in more widespread, in more universities, colleges, things like that, and more business and more governmental agencies. And what we've seen recently is a pushback against some of those things. So we're going to discuss them, talk about why some of these things are happening, and hopefully we can talk about what does this look like for the future in 2025 and beyond, right? So I'm just going to leave these open to all of us so we can discuss. First thing I want to talk about is how can schools effectively address racial biases and promote a more inclusive curriculum to make everyone happy? Let's just put it that way. How can schools effectively address racial biases and promote a more inclusive curriculum to make both sides happy?
I think it's very difficult for them to, because the thing is, the reality is schools aren't the producers of curriculum. So when you look at the content of curriculum, they take all of this content and select it, you know what I mean? And they say, okay, we're selecting that we're going to go with, this provider or that provider or whatnot. You know what I mean? So I think the schools have a hard time because it comes down to how honest are the content writers, how honest are the curriculum writers, how honest are those entities. Then I think it comes down to, now you got the different biases of board members, and then eventually individual educators in the classroom. And I think, where the standard has to be upheld probably the highest is those who are writing the content and the curriculum. That has to be really high. And then I think also as those things are kind of disseminated, we got to now look at how many are we selecting, right? I think that's one big thing, is that, you are who you listen to. And so a lot of students end up becoming like people they choose to listen to because they don't want to hear somebody else. Meaning, why are the kids so into the rap songs and the this and the whatever? It's because they're tuning out some other form of perceived negativity from somewhere else. So I'm going to go ahead and pick that up and say, hey, this is cool. This was what's up, because I'm trying to tune out that other stuff. Part of it is the students aren't being heard. So I'm gonna go ahead and cap it right there.
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure, sure. How can schools effectively address racial biases and promote a more inclusive curriculum to make both sides happy?
I think that would be a difficult task to even try to do, because when adopting curriculum, we will all have to be aware of our microaggressions, our biases, our beliefs, especially when it comes to those who adopt whatever curriculum, to look at the curriculum, whatever subjects is in that, and see, okay, are we, let's say, on the topic of history, are we given multiple different points of view on this particular situation, or are we only given this one perspective from the author? Okay, let's get whatever situation in history or whatever curriculum they're trying to do. How about we give multiple viewpoints, and for higher level thinking, let's have the students come up and create their own opinion based on these different narratives. So now we're not leading their thinking, we're creating opportunities for critical thinking so that they can look at these different perspectives, conduct the research, and they can come with their own thoughts based on, the research and things of that nature. But when we look at a curriculum like that, that's actually teaching kids how to think critically for themselves and become problem solvers. The problem with that, in my opinion, is that when we look at curriculum and districts adopting curriculum is based on politics and business, not necessarily what's in the best interest of the child. I feel like the narratives are masked as, hey, we want the best for our children, but behind those doors is based on politics and business deals.
Man, I think that's huge. I want to just jump on that a bit. And the reason why I say that's such a huge deal is because, and particularly we're talking DEI and stuff like that.
Hey, LYS fam. It's Ole once again. These days, many families are busy but want personalized attention. We at Laddering Your Success understand this dilemma and have created a unique approach to help guide you and your child with personal development tools to build a life of purpose. This intimate approach is helpful for those parents that feel the need to have a focused heart-to-heart conversation deciding on the next steps after high school. We provide individual post-secondary planning, virtual customized college and career counseling, and scholarship guidance and planning. Our one-on-one sessions are tailored to each individual student to maximize their potential in the post-secondary realm. With our guidance, your child will be able to make their dreams a reality. Don't wait. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to business on this podcast.
I'm watching these Facebook clips, and a clip comes up from, what's this guy's name? He's the younger guy with Turning Point or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Turning Point USA. And
Charlie Kirk?
Yeah, thank you, Charlie Kirk. So he's asking these kids about some economics. And he's like, and this is a kid who's studied, he's like, I've studied economics. And he's like, have you heard of this person? Have you heard of this person? Have you heard of this theory? Have you heard of this other theory? And the guy's like, nah. And he's like, well, you're not receiving an education, you're receiving an indoctrination. And that is very, very true, is that all people have to do to get you to think a certain way is not present certain information. It's just omission. And so the thing is, when you think about, what I'm gonna go and call the doctor to be, Mark Crawford was saying, is like, basically the businesses, and this is politics and business. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. The school boards hold an office. You know what I mean? The State Board of Education is an office. So those are political offices that are determining the route of education. And so what does it take for somebody to say, hey, man, I heard your sister's in the hospital. I know she got a bill. Don't worry. So that way the money don't look like it came directly to you. But go ahead and sign us off, approved vendor, approved XYZ. And so these are the things that come with the waste, fraud, and abuse that's happening in government politics. And so that's why I think it's incumbent upon everybody, just the basics of learning how to read, and then that way at some point you at least have the ability to think for yourself. You know what I'm saying? Learn how to do basic research so you could think for yourself, And I think Dr. Crawford just brings up an excellent point. It's like, are we teaching kids to think critically, or are we teaching them, what to think?
No, absolutely. I think the doctor actually answered the second question, but there's some things I wanted to share based off of that. My first note was in regards to the question of how can schools effectively address racial biases is, can they? Question mark. Because I think one of the biggest issues, or one of the biggest responsibilities that we've given to schools and districts without realizing is, to both of your point, we've gave them the power to teach our kids, to indoctrinate our kids. Man, I'm reminded of the vision of the teacher who is teaching something in class, but that one student who is constantly disagreeing or pointing out things that the teacher did not mention because of what that child is learning at home. There used to be a higher emphasis on learning at home, a higher emphasis on applying what you learned in school and practice at home. And you don't see that a lot. And when you don't, I think you get things like, the communities and parents looking more to the schools. Here, just do it for my child, right? And then we go to the McGraw-Hill. We have a whole section from sixth grade to senior year on history, right? The second question I had was, who is both sides, right? And I guess in regards to that, who wins whenever you do things? Who wins whenever you create a narrative that goes one way or another?
So to me,
Okay.
I don't think it's multipolar. I mean, I don't think it's about two sides. I think it's multipolar, and it's always been multipolar. People are about their self-interest. People are doing what makes them happy, what makes them feel good. And if you get caught up in the process of that, so be it. And so to me, I think when people are writing narratives, people are, everything from creating content, you look at us, granted teachers came right for us because they needed a little bit of extra money, you know what I mean? But the thing is, a lot of them were just like, I'm reading and I know what I'm teaching my students is not the full truth. And I would just, some of them is like, man, they're way overqualified to work for us. But the thing is, they'll do it because like we want some truth to get out. And so if this thing makes it or it doesn't, we're cool with it as long as some truth gets out. And so I think to me, that is very, very commendable. And I mean, there's so many great educators, potential educators, life changers who had to leave the districts because you get in and it's a dirty game and people's hands are tied. I remember, and I'm just 100% transparent, we applied for some funding to get invested, and the guy didn't invest in us, not because we didn't have a good idea. He said the principals and the superintendents are going to block you. We stopped investing in education companies like yours. That's crazy, isn't it? It's totally crazy, but it is what it is.
Hey, LYS fam, it's Ole. Just wanted to take a quick break to let you know that even though the cost of college can be daunting, the LYS Scholarship Guide ebook can assist you in realizing your dreams. You can identify and apply for scholarships using the information, advice, and resources in our comprehensive guide. Also, we've provided a template for a successful scholarship essay to help you stand out from the crowd. Don't allow student loan debt to control you. Get your copy of the LYS Scholarship Guide ebook right away to take charge of your destiny. Simply go to lys.com/parents to get your copy today. Now let's get back to that fire conversation.
Did he say why they stopped investing in companies like yours?
Yeah, because of the principals and superintendents basically being backhanded and not doing what's best for students. They knew they were going is a waste of money from their perspective, because from an investment standpoint, right? And I don't want to get too far off into this, but I think it also, I'll tie it into the topic to make it make sense. So it's different levels in business, right? You have somebody who has an idea, but they don't have any actual product or service, right? That's the very basic bottom level of business. I just got something in my head. So you need to take that thing out and make it into something, right? Okay, so when you do that, now you need to be able to scale it and get it to customers. So one of the fastest ways to do that is to go get an investor, right? So if you don't have the money, you go and you say, hey, I need X amount of money so I could get it out there. So part of that is writing up a business plan. But now I'm going to talk about it from the other side. Is you have these institutions, right? Like, Harvard, Yale, banks. You have the public library. You have the cities. You have these different entities that have all this money that they're supposed to be putting away for people's retirement, right? And so this is where, for example, ours is TRS, Texas Retirement System. The way that they get that money to pay people's retirement is that they go to these new startup companies, these people with ideas, and they say, here, we're going to give you X amount of dollars so that you can provide us with a return on that money so we could pay such and such retirement later down the line. That's where it actually comes. So you have these, what they're called venture capitalists, who they make a venture firm that goes out and they'll say, okay, we're going to go to this bank, we're going to go to this billionaire, we're going to go to this millionaire, and then we're going to go to this city, and we're going to get all their money together, and we're going to put that $50 million together, and then we're going to pick 10 companies to put the 50 into. And then as those companies grow, we're going to advise them, we're going to tell them what's the right thing to do, blah, blah, blah. Then we're going to make our money back based off of that. You see what I'm saying? So that's how it works. So the thing is, these companies, these venture companies, are risking grandma's retirement. You see what I'm saying? And so to him, when it came to the point of, should we invest in this education company? It was no, because we've done it before and we see how evil and slimy the superintendents are in some cases, the principals are in some cases, the, XYZ in some cases. Now, why is that super, super, super important? Because again, when you start talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, is that there are other companies that don't get invested in. Like, for example, we've been around a minute, we've been working hard, we've been pushing forward, and we've been having some great success. But there's other companies that, they don't even come to that point of, let me get the idea flushed out. Let me see if the idea actually really works. Okay. And they get invested in. And so what ends up happening is, because these people are from outside of our community, they're not seeing what's happening on the ground. And so therefore, when they make the decision, are we going to invest in Black creative, Black entrepreneur? Most of the time it's no. And so I'll end there, but I think there's a lot on this topic that relates. But good question. Good question.
Good. So I put a note here. I put a note that says, to your point, says the system wins when we can divide and create indoctrinated people to fall in line with a certain narrative. And, to the point, when you do have something that almost sold people themselves, it is, as one of our mentors says, a disruptor. And so just some food for thought to think about in regards to those. All right, so second question, what strategies can be implemented to ensure equitable access to educational resources for all students? This was in regards to that first question about effectively addressing things like racial biases and promote a more inclusive curriculum. So what strategies do you guys think we can implement to ensure equitable access to educational resources? And let me know if you need me to give you a quick example, because I have one.
Yeah, go ahead and throw an example.
Let me give you guys a really good example. Went to a job fair a while ago to meet with some folks, and I met with a teacher who taught at HISD. She was I believe she worked for a tutoring company. It was a tutoring company, and I believe they also did like specialized substituting. So they kind of ran them through, and they made sure that they were really good substitutes when they went to substitute in HISD schools or other districts. And I asked her, I was like, how'd you end up here? And she said she just got tired of, the politics of school districts. She worked in HISD. She worked in two schools, one in River Oaks and one in Casimir Gardens. For those of you who don't know, River Oaks is one of the probably top two most expensive areas in Houston as far as land and real estate goes. And you want to think about density, like average income, population density. it's one of the highest if not the highest, it probably is the highest in the city. And if you look at Cashmere Gardens is a historically African American area, has been historically economically disadvantaged. And so she taught the same grade in one school in River Oaks, one school in Cashmere Gardens. She started off in Cashmere Gardens, and then she went to River Oaks. After about a year or two in the school in River Oaks, she had enough. And I said, what was the issue? She said, mind you, both of these schools are in the same district. She said in the school in Cashmere Gardens, they just taught them the math. They just gave them the math. They just taught them the math. At the school in River Oaks, she said they taught them how to think about the math. It was given to them in a way to where, they were able to critically think and almost come up with their own solutions. They were given, just the platform was given to them in a different way. And she said, I'm teaching the same grade, same district, but I'm teaching it in two different ways. And so she got fed up and she ended up she ended up leaving. And so what strategies can be implemented to ensure equitable access to make sure what happens in Kashmir and what happens in these schools and these higher income areas are the same?
Hey, LYS fam, it's Ole. If there's one thing I love, it's something free. I'm talking free 99, un gratis. No shipping or handling fees, no gotcha fees, nothing like that. With that being said, if you're graduating soon or thinking about college or need a nudge or help to decide, then our free ebook, 10 Things to Think About Before Going to College, has a very balanced and open-minded way of presenting your next steps. It captures broad topics in a personal way by giving students an insightful, interactive, and reflective source of inspiration. It is very beneficial to be able to visualize some of the concepts after high school and apply them directly to you. We all know life, college, and career planning decision-making choices for students can be challenging, especially as they near the completion of high school. This book will provide you with a self-paced guide to your success beyond academics and into real life. Not only is it free, you can complete this book within a week. This will definitely prepare you for long-term success. To get your free copy, simply go to lys.com/students. I mentioned it was free, right? Well, if I didn't, it's free. Like, for real. Okay, back to the podcast.
This topic and that question is interesting because that's exactly what I do. My study, my dissertation is based on with issues exactly like that. And it's really difficult because even with laws in place to ensure equitable access, the problem goes beyond policies that are put in place. The latest policy is the ESSA Act by Obama to replace the No Child Left Behind. But the problem is that with those low income schools, you have things like Title I, which provides the money. And so the issue that we're facing now is like, okay, we're going to provide these schools with more money to ensure that they have equitable access to education as wealthy areas. The problem is the way that money is spent, and that is not designated more specifically, right? It's to their discretion, and that's where the problem lies. Because taking the money, buying laptops and more materials, yes, that helps, right? But it's like, okay, if these students over here have money and they have laptops, okay, these students in the low SES area have laptops as well. That's equitable access, right? But not really. One of the issues that we have is the quality of instruction, which is what in your example you're referring to. And oftentimes the challenge in low SES educational systems is to have persons with high quality curriculum implementation talent, if I just be honest. And that's basically a fancy way to say highly qualified. Most highly qualified teachers would prefer to work in those type of areas where it is a high SES, more wealthy areas, so that they can actually have the freedom to actually teach the way that would benefit those particular children. Then when we look at the low SES education institutions, there's more of a struggle to find highly qualified teachers. So what they do is to begin to settle. Hey, you're not a highly qualified educator, but we need a teacher to fill this spot. So don't worry about being highly qualified. They reel them in by, we're going to prepare you for this class. The problem with that is they're not preparing their teachers with the tools and the knowledge to be able to successfully educate the students in those areas. And so when you have, and that's because they don't really have the tools and the knowledge how to educate these particular type of students. And so when you have a teacher that is passionate, as in Olay's example, and they go in and they're like, hey, why are we teaching like this? This is not beneficial to these students. Let's try to change things up. And then you have everyone fighting against that person. No, like, why are you ruffling feathers? Because now you're going to expose that all of these people at a higher up level do not know what they're doing and do not know what they're talking about. And all they have to do, they have more power. So it's like, we can make you be quiet because you're one versus many. So now you have an issue. So I feel like it's definitely going to be challenging to ensure that equitable access of a quality education. So sorry if I was talking for too long.
No, 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 that was great. That was great. Well said. So when I thought about that question, I thought first teachers, but then a lot of my attention went to parents. Goes back to the first question where we want to look at districts to create these opportunities to create really highly qualified teachers to be able to create this educational balance, right? But a lot of this stuff starts at home, and this is kind of something that we've been talking about for a long time. Is what can parents do to be able to create these opportunities for their children? Districts and specialists and teachers can only do so much, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of this comes from what is happening at home. I want to get you guys' thoughts on that, or if you had something that you wanted to drop in that as well.
Yeah, I think this is where Jesus and the scriptures are so profound. Is Jesus says this? He says a student is not above their teacher, but when they have been fully grown or when they've been fully taught, they can become like or her. So the thing is, we're not above the quality of who we listen to. You see what I'm saying? And so this is one of the reasons why lifelong learning is essential. A lot of times our mindset is, oh man, I can't wait. I read the book and then I'm done and I'm done with that level. And we don't really look at the fact that there's levels to life. So when you start looking at people who are uber successful and you're like, how is that person so successful? How often do they read? The thing is, you look at CEOs and, they say, oh man, the average CEO reads 50 books a year. And you're like, man, that person who's working 60, 70 hours a week is reading 50 books a year. But then you don't have time to read. So the thing is, as parents, it's really, really key to always seek access to the best quality information that you can get. And and this becomes a challenge, right? Because I think that's why people get took so much is they, somebody's blinging online, you know what I'm saying? And then it's like, oh man, I'm gonna get into this. And then it's like, dang, I got took. But you should have learned something from that situation that you could take and say, you know what, that cost me, $150 course, whatever, $1,000 course. Now let me go to the next thing. So that's one. Number two is access to resources. And the thing is, there are tons of free resources. You need to be at the public library. You need to be at the public library. You need to be at the public library. So what does that mean? If you're a parent and you're struggling, oh man, we can't even afford books. One piece of research talked about when books are present in the home, just the fact that books are present, on average, that child hears 1 million more words by the time they hit like first grade or something like that, just because the books are present. What it means is that the fact that the books are present, there's a higher likelihood people are interacting with information. That's basically what you could pull out from that synopsis. And so that's the big thing is just, even if you don't read at the library, just go. And why? Because you're going to surround yourself with the type of people that read. And you never know, that one little conversation that pops off is, how you doing? Oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, well, I just like to bring my kids here. Oh, really? You do too? Okay, well, what neighborhood? I'm right down the street. Oh, you? Okay, cool. Well, what else do you like to? Okay, and now you're connecting with people who have at least somewhat similar interests. And I don't, even if they might not like hot dogs the way you like hot dogs, if they're interested in education, if they're interested in better information, at least they're progressing in some way, shape, or form.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Definitely true. I think the average person will be truly impressed or surprised. I think just in the little work that I've done outside of the classroom and seeing like what's out there, you go past most schools in the district that I'm in, they'll have a little case there with like free books that you can just literally, you can put the books in and whoever wants a book can take a book. It's almost as easy as picking up a piece of grass from in a park, and that's pretty awesome to see. But there definitely are a lot of opportunities out there that we just don't know about, and so you do have to get out there and get out in the community. So very, very true. Let's take a look. I want us to answer this last question before we head out. How can student voices be amplified in discussions about equity and inclusion in education? How can student voices be amplified in discussions about equity and inclusion in education? So let me tell you. Go ahead.
I was going to say, when I think about this question, what's that little girl that they keep putting out for climate change? You know what I'm talking about? The little girl they keep putting out, Gretchen Whitmire or whatever. The thing is, I think sometimes as adults, we put too much into what kids, but at the same time, we're not taking into account what they're saying. And I think that's a balancing act. You know what I mean? I think there's sometimes it's, as a matter of fact, today at my church, they're like, hey, we're trying to get the middle school ministry started up again. What we want to do. And so they're like, Festus, they kind of voluntold pull. And I said, let me talk to the kids real quick. I said, listen, what do y'all want to do? What do y'all want to food? I was like, okay, we'll work for food. I got you. You know what I'm saying? And then I'm like, okay, what else y'all want? One kid was like, man, I just want acknowledgement. I bet. You know what I'm saying? That's a deep need. That's like some people, I'm almost invisible to some people. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, okay, bet. So we got food and we got eggnog. What else we got? Okay, cool. My thought is you need to hear what their request is so that you could put it into the plan to execute. Why? Because otherwise you're force feeding them something that they might not want. And so a lot of these, young kids you got particularly situations just happened, Mike Miles, HISD, the kids are out there protesting and doing walkouts. And it's like, who's organizing these? Who's dropping these ideas? Just
beautiful point.
You know what I'm saying? And so the thing is, and this is my thing that I've had to learn. And this is one of the reasons I don't just tell people, yo, you do this, you do this, you do this. Are you going to be responsible for the outcome? The answer is no. So when this person makes this decision based off of what you're telling them, and then they have to live with that for the rest of their life, are you gonna pay their bills? Are you gonna, you know what I'm saying? And so this is why I think we need to be very careful taking kids and putting them up front and saying, kid, have a voice. And it's like, they don't even know what the degree that they're talking about. So to me, I think it's a mix of like, hey, listen, what is it you want to talk? You want to talk about that? Okay, let's bring out all the resources together. Let's pull here's the books. You got these books, you got those books. Here, let's sit down and look at and research the topics together. I promise if you did that, what would happen is the number of people who start complaining would dwindle way down to this. Then if you said, okay, now who's ready to take action? It will probably dwindle down to that. And so the thing is, those who are the doers are very few. You see what I'm saying? And to be an educated doer is even more difficult. So I'll stop with that.
I think that The educational system would need to provide an outlet for the students to share whatever their thoughts are on whatever topics that may be. And I think in order for that to happen, the educational institution has to be open to hearing their points of view, and most often they're not. It's more so of, if you think about education, it's they have a system already in place, and it's like get along, go along to get along type of system, which is why you have situations or circumstances, as Festus just talked about, like the boycott and the things with the students of not going to class and things of that nature, because their voice has not been heard. But if you create a system that gives them an outlet for their perspectives and point of views to be heard, then we can have a system in place to where it can be organized and set up within that educational setting. All right, let's hear their perspectives. Let's have a committee. Let's create a committee for them where you have representatives where they have these discussions, and we can bring these discussions along and we can discuss this in a manner that is organized and find a way to see what is reasonable, see what is realistic, and can it be done, and have these conversations. I feel like that's teaching people how to deal with conflict, how to communicate different points of view, and how to listen, modeling, seeking to understand your perspective. If that's something that can't be done because of whatever systems, let's have that conversation. Let's talk about it. So if it goes beyond their head, let's create a lane and an avenue for them in an appropriate way to have that communication. And so what are you doing? You're building so many skills within those students. You taking that as an opportunity to learn and build community with these students, and you're actually going to build buy-in through that process. I think that's the way to do it. But again, that's my thinking, to where all stakeholders' voices are heard. But what do I know?
You know a lot. You know a lot. So we'll definitely, that's something that should be taken seriously, right? So wonderful answers. I love those answers. When I thought about this question, I put myself back in a high school classroom, and I put myself talking with kids. And there was this thing that I really like to do. I like to give kids the facts. They used to say unadulterated facts. I like to just give them the info. If it needs to be brought down to their level, bring it down to their level. But kind of like to your point, Festus, I like to give kids facts and just have them at it, and have them come up with their own views and their own thoughts on this information. I think there's some really amazing things in the last 70 years that, it's just of history, right? But history goes, since the beginning of time. But there are some amazing things that have happened that kids have been given a short stick instead of being given the whole stick. And I think that kind of goes to what, kind of what we have been talking about today is kids are so much more capable than we give them credit for. And I remember talking about a lot of different things in my classroom, but I would kind of bring it out in a way that they would understand. So I'd use things that are popular with them at the time and use that to talk about certain things. And, it's so cool because they would be like, man, you just going to let them boot gang your land like that? You know what I mean? They would come in and they would, say all these things. And then I would bring in the lesson to say, that's exactly what happened here. And so from that, just their whole appreciation and their ability to consume and have an understanding in it is greatly impacted. And I think there's some other things that our kids deal with today as well that, I think the average teacher would say a lot of their students seem disinterested in these things, not realizing that, many things are cyclical. So this thing of this, this theme, the Kendrick Drake, you know, would have been, two professors talking about something back in the early 60s, helping them see things like that. So, I mean, like you said, Festus, we could talk about this for hours on end. But I guess the thing that I really wanted us to be able to do was to just describe the foundation, of where we are right now in regards to this DEI situation, and also talk about the fact that there are some things, just like the way a lot of things are brought to our students these days, that even adults don't really get the full story of, right? Because they get one side or they get skewed information. So the goal is to, as Crawford said, we got to seek to understand, right? And so I hope you learned a little something from that today. So I want to say thank you again for listening to this latest episode of EduSteps. If you're listening to this, if you have been listening to this, please make sure you go on YouTube, subscribe, Laddering Your Success. Just click that subscribe button, like, share with a friend. We're going in on 2 years at the end of this year of doing the EduSteps podcast. So thankful for your support. So thankful for your listening. Even if you're listening for 1 minute, we appreciate it. We hope you listen for maybe 5-10 minutes, a little bit more, but all things come in time. So thank you so much for joining us on this latest episode of EduSteps. Festus, go ahead if you can. Give them the phrase that pays, my good sir.
All right, listen, y'all. There are legitimate excuses for not going to college. There's no legitimate excuse for not getting an education. Go ahead and hit that like button because we know you like this episode. Hit that share button with somebody you know who needs to hear this, and hit the subscribe button so you know when the next video drops. All right, y'all be blessed.
Oh, you still there? Well, thank you so much for listening to the LYS podcast.